Hello, I'm Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor of Features and Multimedia at Transport Topics. Thank you for tuning in to our latest Transport Topics webinar, How to Reduce Risk Ahead of the 2027 Truck Emission Changes. Today, we're going to take a close look at upcoming emission regulations for commercial trucks and how those emission changes could affect equipment demand and availability in the next few years. To discuss how motor carriers can prepare for these changes, I'm very excited to bring in Jacob Brazier and Aaron Thompson from Transport Enterprise Leasing, our program sponsor. Jacob is Vice President of Fleet Leasing, and Aaron is Vice President of Maintenance at TEL. A warm welcome to you both.
Thank you, Seth.
Seth, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah, so let's just start this conversation with a quick overview of the changing regulatory landscape for commercial truck emissions, right? There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of changes here on the horizon. EPA's Phase 3 greenhouse gas rule and tighter NOx standards go into effect starting in 2027. At the same time, California is mandating increasing adoption of zero-emission trucks with its advanced clean trucks and advanced clean fleets rules. The truck and engine manufacturers have been preparing for these changes, and many fleet executives, of course, are already planning their strategies around it. But I have to wonder how well the industry as a whole understands the equipment changes that are coming, especially some of the small carriers out there. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and maybe just one after the other. Where does the industry stand right now in terms of awareness and understanding of the upcoming emission rules and how they could impact the equipment market, in the next few years?
It's a great question, Seth. I think the first thing to clarify is that GHG Phase 3 standards go into effect with model year 27 trucks, where the tighter NOx standards go into effect for calendar year 27. So GHG standards impact the vehicle manufacturer, while the NOx standards are more specific to the engine manufacturer. Obviously, if you're in a vertically integrated platform, they're one and the same. So it's an important distinction to make, as the vehicle manufacturer may have to implement some new mandatory or new standard technologies or components in calendar 26 to get compliant with the CO2 grams per ton mile. GHG standards are they're technology neutral, performance based, and it really leaves it up to the OEM to decide which emission controls technology is best suited for their customers, given the truck or chassis they're buying. Depending on the OEM, there could be some additional technology components made standard on the truck to meet Phase 3 GHG, which could add cost depending on how you've previously spec'd your equipment. Some of those examples that are already in the marketplace today would be, aero devices like bumper closeouts, wheel closeouts, predictive cruise, active axle lube management. So each OEM has a strategy for how they'll meet Phase 3 standards, and depending upon how much of the fuel efficiency options you currently employ may determine, really how impactful CY26 truck specs and pricing is to your fleet.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever you think about greenhouse gas, it's all about fuel economy, basically, is the pathway there. Jacob, what would you add to Aaron's comments?
Yeah, I think Aaron put a lot of information there, but from a sales perspective right now, I think we're in a very educational phase with our customers, where a lot of people understand something's happening, but they don't know exactly what's happening. And I'm trying to lay it out for them as, this is one of the most aggressive changes since really 2007 and 2010 as far as reducing emissions. We all know 07 and 2010, we all lived through that. And what did we learn from that? So really right now we're saying, hey, it's coming. You have the ability to affect how you purchase over the next 2 years. This is the third biggest cost you have is running a trucking company, is purchasing equipment. So really understanding what does the effect of this emission change have to do on my buy cycle. And that's some of the stuff that we're really looking at with customers currently right now, because this is it's going to be a big change. It's going to be a big change. Some of it's going to work. Some of it's might not work. So how do you mitigate risk?
Yeah, for sure. And, we've had a little bit of a reprieve from the, extremely disruptive emission events, last decade or so. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the greenhouse gas rules didn't have as big of an impact as some of those other rules you mentioned, going back to 07 and 2010. But yeah, you think back and from what we've seen in the past, some of those major changes in truck emission controls sometimes led to pre-buys, right? When carriers purchase a bunch of new trucks right before the new emission standards go into effect. And the classic example there, of course, is really a historic pre-buy event in 2006 ahead of the new EPA rules that went into effect in 07. In that time, the manufacturers added diesel particulate filters to meet those standards. Of course, that also added cost. But now here we are, almost 2 decades later, and many in the industry, including manufacturers, are projecting another major pre-buy event ahead of the 2027 standards. What's your perspective on this, and just how large of a pre-buy do you think we can expect to see here in the pretty near term here in the next few years?
Yeah, back to 2006, that year still holds, I think, for class 6 through 8, medium duty, heavy duty, still holds a record for North America truck builds at over 500,000. That was one of the most significant emissions changes up to that point. To your point earlier, everything since then has really been incremental improvements to that with 1 and 2. What we see coming in calendar 27, while as a percent of NOx reduction, it may not be as dramatic as 06 was, but we're beginning to push up against really the laws of physics and what an internal combustion engine can actually do. In the past, the major changes that they've made have cost the industry in fuel economy, reliability, and really ultimately driver satisfaction. So while I do believe the engine manufacturers, they've learned a lot along the way and technology's improved, carriers that felt the impact of their business, they haven't forgotten. So it wouldn't surprise me to see, North America class 6 through 8 builds hit well north of 400 in 25 and 26 again.
Yeah, Jacob, sounds like you're expecting the same thing, expecting a really sizable pre-buy event here in the near term.
Yeah, I would be on the same page with that. Obviously, the economy and economics have to dictate a little bit about what's going to happen when you have a big pre-buy event. But anytime you have OEMs pushing new engine platforms that could cost anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 more than they currently do today, that's going to drive the consumer to buy early. And what we're saying is you can buy even earlier. So if you think 2027 year model engine platforms are going to be up in price, your 25 and 26 will be able to buy those early to help mitigate the risk where you don't have to buy as many in that platform. So I think the whole industry as a whole is definitely going to have a pre-buy event. I think there's no question about that. How large it is, being on my side of the house, I'd love to see 450, 500,000 units. That'd be awesome. But is it a lot of economic indicators have to happen to get there as well? And I think most carriers in the market today also would say, hey, you can raise the price $10,000 to $25,000, but why be able to afford the truck at that price right now? And the question's still up: is rates going to allow the price to go up to where it needs to go to? And they got to make all that happen.
Yeah, and of course, if there's going to be a rush to order new trucks, that means that it could become difficult to secure build slots. At least in a time frame that you want ahead of the emission changeover, and that means it's important to really start planning for this now. So I'd like to get your perspective. If there's going to be this big rush to order trucks ahead of 27, when do you expect to see that build up on the OEM's order books, and are we going to see that spike in demand? Not just in 2026, but even starting this coming year in 25.
Yeah, great question, Seth. And fleets probably need to start planning life cycle and CapEx expenses now for calendar 25 through calendar 28. Really, I fully expect certain OEM orders to start ramping up for calendar year 25. As you know, we have one of the engine suppliers, Cummins, has chosen to take advantage of that pull ahead provision and bring their phase 3 engine to market early, 1 year ahead of the rest. For now, they're the only one that's announced they're going to do that. So as of now, the other manufacturers are on track for their phase 3 in calendar 27, so model year 28, meaning you can still get the current technology, current engine and after treatment in calendar 25 and 26 for those manufacturers. So that said, as we saw in 22 and 23, when the industry was really bouncing back from COVID, the smaller fleets kind of got blocked out of the order board, and the larger carriers, they were they were jumping in, refreshing the fleet after extending, their cycles due to supply chain issues we saw in 2021. So, therefore, I would expect, a definite uptick in orders starting in calendar year 25 and then in 26 again, depending upon how the other engine OEMs bring their product to market. But it could be a blessing that Cummins has pulled forward. It maybe extends and gives the order board some capacity over 2 years instead of cramming it all into one. But I would anticipate, towards fourth quarter this year, you'll see some of those larger fleet orders starting to ramp up for 25.
Yeah, so something to even think about, and really right now, it's close enough. 2027 is not as far away as it seems. But one of the factors you touched on there, one of the reasons about that often drives pre-buy activity is cost, right? It's widely expected that there's going to be an increase in cost associated with engines and trucks that can comply with EPA's 2027 rules. So just how much of a price increase are we talking about here? What would you anticipate based on studies, projections, your thoughts, if you had to either put a number on it or at least just some guidance on how much of an increase in cost of new equipment?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? Earlier we discussed some of what the OEMs are doing to comply with the CO2 piece of Phase 3 GHG. The bigger impact is really going to be felt with the NOx reduction that the engine guys have to come up with to comply in 27 for model year 28. So the current EPA standards allow for 200 milligrams of NOx per horsepower hour for engines made this year. While a carb registered truck in 24 has got to operate at 50 milligrams. So carbon EPA for 27, calendar 27, have aligned, and all new engines have to meet the 35 milligram NOx level. In addition, these engines and after treatment systems, they also got to carry a much longer warranty and a 750,000 mile end of useful life for the heavy duty market. So that's really more than 4 times the standard heavy duty after treatment warranty today, and almost double the useful life. So meaning that system, it's got to be scrubbing NOx down to 35 milligrams at mile 650,000, just like it did at mile 1. So you don't have to be an actuary or an economist to understand that that's going to add significant cost. Not to mention the actual technology and hardware required to get from 200 milligrams down to 35 milligrams. So each engine manufacturer is going to have their own technology strategy on how they're going to get there. Early estimates from several of them have ranged anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 more for that engine after treatment. So not everyone has really even fully announced what that technology looks like, but they have announced some general price guidance of could be $15,000 to $20,000 a truck.
Yeah, Jake, are you in line with that? Basically, and
yeah,
prices will go up, and we'll see how much.
Yeah, I think prices are going to go up. I think 10 to 25 grand has been the common theme that we've heard, and the real question is how are the consumers going to react to that? Are they going to extend their financing options? Are they going to try to bake that into their payments, or their payments still go up? Can they extend the life of that product so they can use it longer since they're going to have more warranty? Is the truck going to be reliable so it can actually be used for a longer period of time is a big question. If you just did it into a standard finance term right now, if you own a 33-month lease, you can be looking from anywhere from $300 to $700 more per month on the newer truck versus what you're paying currently today. And from a cash flow perspective, that's pretty huge on a trucking that already is what I would consider pretty compressed on the rates, but hopefully getting better. It feels like it's getting better over the last 30, 45 days. So the prices are going up, but how are we going to react to them? How are we going to manage that cost? That's the big thing that we have to think about over the next 2 years, and really as we approach the pre-buy, how are we going to manage it, how are we going to finance it, how are we going to build it in so we can continue to cash flow as a trucking company.
Yeah, for sure. And your point on the overall market conditions. Trucking companies, of course, have had a rough couple of years these past 2 years, and overcapacity situation. A lot of cases moving the same amount of freight for less than they did, of course, during the I call it the 2021 freight boom, as everybody's coming back from from the COVID shutdowns and the economic recovery there. But what does the market look like as we move closer to 2027? What can fleet operators afford to do is an interesting question as we move closer. You also touched on vehicle performance and vehicle maintenance. Of course, whenever you have new technology introduced, that's always a question mark. So from your vantage point, I'd like to hear from both of you on this as well. What are the maintenance related risks that you envision, with the new equipment in 2027? I know that's an unknown, but what are the possibilities and how do you think about that from a planning perspective?
Yeah, I don't envy an engine manufacturer's position the last 10, 20 years. It's tough to keep up, but with each emission change we've seen over the last 2 decades, you always hear from the OEM that they all say the same thing. We've been running this technology in Europe for years, or we've got X million miles on this platform with customer validation units with minimal issues. And while all that may be true, I mean, a lot of times, as we've seen in the past, the U.S. market is different, different applications, different duty cycles. So as I look back, the real risk, I think, it exists, within the dealer and the fleet service network. For dealers, there's a significant training curve they got to overcome. New technology typically requires new tooling, new diagnostics, and a lot of them are going to invest, in 1 or 2 technicians to just kind of maintain certification, right? And you just need to pray he or she is actually not on vacation when your truck goes down. In addition, the fleets face the same challenges, but are disadvantaged, a bit when it comes to access to the training, access to the tooling and diagnostics. Not to mention, and probably the biggest thing from the fleet perspective would be just a large task of getting drivers trained on how to operate these new engines. If you recall, the DPFs and regens, and I think we're just now getting to our point. Most drivers today understand how and when to regen, and then it was DEF and getting DEF and fuel mixed up, and so there's a big training curve, and I'm sure the new technology is going to most likely have some new driver interaction that we need to train them to. These new regulations require that NOx reduction hit the standard within the first couple minutes from ignition when the engine's cold, and that's when NOx is at its highest. So you're going to have added components. They're going to have to generate a lot of heat at or before startup that require possible electrical power source in some cases. Just a lot of added complexity that's going to add cost. So I think you look at our dealer networks, our fleet service centers, and our drivers. That's, to me, is where the risk is. There's a lot of energy and resources that go into getting all 3 of those populations up to speed.
No, I would echo everything Aaron said right there. I mean, it's an unknown. We don't know what's going to break before it breaks. I mean, there's a lot of testing. There's a lot of requirements of it before the even technology goes in on the market and we get access to it. But the unknown is the biggest thing, and that's the learning curve. And what we always preach at TEL with our trucking companies that we do business with is, uptime is everything. So every day you're down at a shop, you're not generating revenue. So you want to mitigate the amount of time that you're down. Now, you can do that by training your staff. You can do that by forming good relationships. TEL does have a 24/7 fleet maintenance program that comes with them that we can manage those relationships and help with your staff with the training to make sure they understand what the new technology does. That can help mitigate risks of what maintenance issues it can happen. And then also, that is why pre-buys happen. People don't know how that was going to perform. So they load up on trucks before so they can buy as little so they can try to fill it out. And that's really what's going to happen is people are going to buy less of the model year 28 or in year 27 type trucks because they don't know what maintenance issues they're going to have. In reality, and what I would pray for is it all works perfect and they get better fuel economy and better utilization, and everybody's really happy with it. That has not been what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, maybe hope for the best and prepare for the worst. It's probably some words of wisdom there. But Appreciate those insights. Now, for TEL, of course, you're an equipment leasing provider, so I'm curious to hear your perspective on this choice that fleets always have. Right, they can always choose between purchasing their equipment outright versus leasing, or sometimes, some cases, a full service lease. How do emission changes like what we're expecting in 2027, as well as a potential pre-buy, factor into that decision of lease versus buy?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and my answer to that would be kind of, I don't know if emissions changes and pre-buys really factor into, I lease for or buy. It's really, what do you run as a company? What kind of trade cycles do you have? How do you want to finance your equipment? Is the big thing when you look at lease versus buy. Usually with buy, you're going to have a larger down payment versus sometimes with lease you can have little to no capital outlay whatsoever. Certainly, your trade cycle at TEL, we believe in a solo operation that a 33-month trade cycle is the most advantageous, and your maintenance costs goes up exponentially once you hit that 33 months mark. We want to give you options. So with emissions and the uncertainty of it, do you want to keep running trucks, or do you not want to keep running trucks during the actual emissions change cycle? You have the option to continue to run and buy that equipment, or you have the option to turn it in and get new equipment if the emissions change really goes the way it should. Also with TEL, you get increased buying power because we're going to purchase enough trucks every single year. You get bought in and get the TEL buying power versus if you're a small to medium sized fleet, you might only be buying 5 to 10 trucks a year. So you get some help there. But the biggest difference between TEL and the traditional lease is we have an unbundled lease service, no CPI, no variable charges. And we have 24/7, 365 fleet maintenance. That's going to be the biggest thing to help you keep your trucks running over the road. And a team that is here to support you that you don't get through the traditional financing options through the OEMs. Will be dedicated to your fleet. So that's the biggest difference between leasing. I guess leasing with TEL versus buying traditionally. I don't know if it really has to do is emissions coming or not, but I will say with emissions coming, flexibility is key. And with TEL, at the end of every lease with an FMV lease, you get flexibility. And that's a big deal when you're trying to make decisions as a trucking company. It's hard enough to keep your trucks on the road making money and dealing with freight and dealing with the drivers. You want to have flexibility in how you handle your equipment.
Sure. Hey, Seth, one thing I may add just to Jacob's comments, kind of piggyback, is, at TEL, we're buying, multiple thousand trucks a year, right? And, if you're a small fleet and maybe you're 50 or 100 trucks and you're leasing five a year. Our fleet support program that comes with the lease that Jake is referencing, again, it's 24/7. That team, we may have 500 of those engines all in the same mileage band. And if there's a problem with one, we've probably seen it in multiple. And we've probably already run the traps and know that we have a process or a procedure in place that we know if X fails, this is how we handle it. If you're 50 trucks or 100 trucks and you got 5 of them, you got to run that trap yourself the first time, and it gets expensive when you're trying to do it yourself. And so I would say, we have expertise in house. We've seen the problem, we've seen the issue hundreds of times, and we've got a way to expedite and get things taken care of without having to cause a bunch of downtime and pain. So.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's going to be a learning process, and sort of the industry learning from your peers and from your partners in the industry will be important. I think especially if you are a smaller carrier, smaller fleet, is not going to have the size or scope and just the sheer amount of equipment to learn from. There's also, I think, the question of purchasing power, right? So large fleets, the very large buyers are, I think, in a good position, of course, because they have a lot of purchasing power. They're in a good position to secure build slots for the new equipment and the time frame that they're looking for. But that's tougher for a smaller carrier to get on the order board potentially, or have the buying power to get the equipment that you're looking for at the time you want it. Any special considerations for smaller fleets as we move closer to 2027 on that front?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about partners, and I think TEL's a partner with small to medium-sized carriers and owner-operators all across the country, we want to give you the same accessibility to equipment as the mega fleets across the country. We want you to have dependable access to equipment when you need it. Not go to your dealer during allocation period and they tell you, yeah, we'd love to sell you a new truck. Here's your price, and we'll deliver it 13 months from now. We want you to come to us and say, yep, here's your truck. Here's your package. Here's what we can do for you. We can get it to you within 30 to 60 days in the highest peak of demand, and then usually within a week to 2 weeks in the lower peaks of demand. So we want to partner with these people because we understand how that works. When your trucks are breaking down, you need to replace them. You don't have 12 to 14 months to try to run these things out. And that's the advantage of partnering with a company like TEL. We give you access to that so you can predictably replace your equipment at the end of its life cycle. And you don't have to try to run it an extra year. That costs companies tremendous amounts of money trying to run a truck that needs to be replaced for an extra year. And fuel economy savings and maintenance costs and just general uptime and utilization. We want to take that part of it off your shoulders and put it on our part and be a partnership with you is how we look at that for sure.
Yeah. I think one of the big takeaways from this conversation for pretty much all of our listeners is that, this isn't something that's happening down the line in the future. It's really, the time is now to really plan for this. So what actions do you think fleet managers should be taking between now and 12 months from now? What are some of the decisions that they need to make soon so they're prepared for the emission changes and potential pre-buy so they're ready and they're not caught flat-footed?
Yeah, I mean, so there's several different things that we can do as a fleet, and this is what we want our sales team to be able to sit down with you and actually go through this with your fleet manager, your owner. The first thing would be evaluate your buying cycle over the next 24 months. Like, what do we need to purchase over the next 2 years? What do we need to replace? What do we know is coming to the end of its useful life cycle? And then by doing that, you're going to basically analyze your fleet mix. How many 2019s, 2020s, 2021s, 2022, 23-year models do I have? And that's going to project how we're going to go about tackling this. The other thing would be is how many of those can I pull forward? If you think about the pre-buy, the closer you get to the emissions change, potentially the higher price that truck is going to be. So how many can you pull forward into the next 12 to 14 months to try to take advantage of before the demand hits? Because we all can agree that the closer we get to the emissions change, if the pre-buy happens, that price should go up. So is there anything in 2026 that I want to pull forward to 2025? Is there anything in 2025 that I want to pull forward to the Q4 of 2024? You start thinking about that right now. So what that leads to is you do invest more heavily on your fleet mix over the next 24 months. That's what we're recommending, and we want to show you the math and the numbers to support that. So you have less to replace in the 2027 year model or 27-year model buy-in when the emissions come into play. Other than that, obviously explore any government funding or transition costs you have. If you looked at technologies outside of diesel, obviously I would explore that as we go into that. If you have shorter haul routes or anything of that nature, I think that technology is probably still a little bit far off, but that is something that you could utilize if you have freight that can use something of that nature. I guess the first thing I would do is pick up the phone or visit tel360.com and get with one of our guys so we can start this process with you. But we want to go through that and explore those options with you and give you an analysis of what your fleet mix and what we would recommend for you to do over the next 24 months.
Certainly appreciate those, that guidance, and it's. I think that the, call it the fleet managers, planners. It's more complex than it's ever been before. And I think it's only going to get more complex for sure.
I would agree. We never want any of our customers to be, operating from a mode of scarcity. Like, I have to do this today. Like, if you make a plan and execute the plan, the results usually end up better. So how do we put that plan together for you?
For sure. One topic I wanted to touch base on just a little bit here is the used truck market, because of course the residual value of equipment is an important factor for life cycle of new purchases and for buyers and sellers across throughout the vehicle's life cycle. But going back to that huge pre-buy event back in 2006, there were major ripple effects in the used truck market for many years to come. do you think we'll see something like that in the years that follow 2027? Could it have some big ripple effects on the used market as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of the used truck market and you think about just TEL in general and the flexibility of an FMV value leases, having options at the end helps mitigate risks of what could happen. Um, if I knew what used truck prices were going to be 2.5, 3 years from now, I'd be a multimillionaire. And predicting stock market dips and only buying on the dips. Um, but there's a lot of factors in the used truck market. You could see prices up higher than they've ever been because people are buying and the used trucks are more valuable because the technology maybe is not doing good. Um, Also, you could see the exact opposite of that. If the technology is doing well and there's a glut of used trucks on the market,
Mm-hmm.
they could go new. So it can go either way. It's very hard to predict is the truck's going to be worth more or less 3 years from now.
Yeah.
I'm in the job of talking about what I think is going to happen, but I can never say I know this is going to this is going to happen for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, but it's something to think about for sure. And yeah, I mean, that story will be written, I think, as some of the new equipment hits the road and see how it performs. And
Right.
that's one of the big variables that will help determine that for sure. Uh, and Jacob, you mentioned, looking at some of the options, beyond diesel, right? Diesel, of course, is, remains the dominant technology in our industry, will be for, certainly some years to come. But we've, seen a lot of new options beginning to enter the industry. Diesel engines, of course, are becoming cleaner, but there's also this regulatory push for zero emission trucks to become a bigger part of the industry. All the OEMs have introduced battery electric models. Now, as you mentioned, they're generally geared toward short haul operations. That's what the technology fits: short haul, local distribution, maybe port drayage. Uh, Beyond that, we also see a lot of investment in hydrogen fuel cell technology that maybe extends the length of haul and can open up some more opportunities for that technology. But uh, also, even a fresh look at natural gas in some quarters of the industry, and interest in renewable fuels, including renewable diesel. So you can continue on with the internal combustion engine, but on cleaner fuels. But really, in short, there's just going to be this expanding menu of powertrain options as we move further into the future. And really, it's going to just depend in a lot of cases on the application. What are the parameters of how are you using the truck? Also, where you're operating geographically, state to state, different regulations in place. But I'd like to hear both of you just take a couple minutes here and tell us what you expect to see for in terms of the future of trucking equipment. What do you expect to see in the medium to long term future? What mix of technologies and fuels do you expect to be on the market and will really power the commercial trucks that will be on the road? In say call it 10 years and beyond.
Yeah, Seth,
how's that for a crystal ball question?
Yeah, that's another $1 million question. I agree that there's not a one size fits all in what the industry does with the equipment. You've got to have kind of an all the above, approach to it. And you're right, diesel is going to be part of the over the road trucking, economy for a long time. There are, lots of options with different applications, and dependent upon, the application and like the haul and the infrastructure, is it there to support it or not? Time will tell, and I think the market ultimately is going to pick which one of those develop faster than others, whether that's battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell. There are some really interesting technologies with your to renewable diesel, renewable natural gas. There's natural gas engines beginning to make a resurgence. I think we all remember the natural gas first go around, and the economics, I think, and the technology has improved to make that another a viable option for definitely long haul and even some regional work. So my take is hydrogen is definitely, I think, longer term maybe a great solution from a cleanliness, availability. We've got to figure out how to produce it in an economical way. It takes so much electricity to blast these atoms apart. But I think the market dollars will flow, and the solution will advance faster, and the market will be the one to pick that. I don't think you can force it on this industry. This industry is stubborn, I think maybe is the right word. We like our diesel, and it's efficient, and right now it's about to be the cleanest it's ever been, and we need some time to recoup the investment we're about to make in new clean diesels. So I think all of them have an opportunity, and I think the market's gonna pick which one advances the fastest. So, Jacob, what do you hear from your customers?
Yeah, I mean, so I just got back from the TXTA last week and in San Antonio, and if I went around the room and asked them what do they think's coming next in the next 10 years, I think the large majority would say I will still be running a diesel powered unit 10 years from now. Just because that's the industry. That they're only going to change when they really have to change. Is the way I think this is going to work. But if you look at the actual government itself, they are pushing zero emissions, and the money is getting poured into electric and poured into alternate fuel technologies. And I think that's going to end up also driving to infrastructure changes, where you're going to see it more readily available across the country to look at natural gas or hydrogen or electric. And there's always like a cost evaluation curve that you look at anything, is when the actual technology becomes more cost efficient, then that's when it really starts adoption. And those are things that are coming. Now, I think in the next 10 years, over the road, irregular route trucking, diesel is here to stay. I don't see the electric platform taking over that at all. I think you're going to really see a big uptick in the electric side of things in short haul, 250 miles and less, static routes back and forth where they can charge on both ends of it. I think that application is a really good use for that. If I was a betting man, and I'm not a betting man, but if I was a betting man long term, I do think hydrogen is going to be the most productive of all the use cases that we're seeing for over the road trucking. In my opinion, I think you get a better lifespan out of it. I think that it's more compatible to what diesel is right now. I think the drivers will be able to adopt it a little bit better. So that's kind of where my gut tells me we're going. But I'm going to say, like my friends down in Texas, 10 years from now, we're still going to be selling diesel trucks to the large majority of the market, unless something changes. And you never know. In this industry, things change on a dime, and when they change quick, and you just got to be ready to move in the right direction. But in the near term, diesel's here to stick. I think alternative fuel sources are very interesting to look at, along with autonomous trucking. All those things are very interesting to look at. I think you got longer than a 10-year runway till those really become viable across the country for a large majority of the trucking companies that we deal with here at TEL. And I'm talking about fleets anywhere from 250 and below to the independent owner operator. Will that technology really become economical for them to use on a day-to-day basis? My gut tells me no, but I've been proven wrong many times.
I really appreciate the thoughts on that, because it is, as you put it, Aaron, the kind of the $1 million question. And I think that the answer, of course, is different for different fleet operators. And as you both stated, it's not, our industry is not one size fits all by any means. And it's all about the application, the business case, and the answers, I think, will be different, depending on what your operations look like, maybe where you're operating, and we'll see a mix. And yeah, it's hard to envision, even, say we do reach a point, when diesel trucks are no longer sold, it'll still be many years when we'll still be on the road. So I don't think that probably any of us will be around in the industry when the last diesel truck will last probably all of us. I think
that will be the pre-buy to end all pre-buys right there.
But more options on the table, and I think that it certainly is becoming more and more complex. The decision making, it needs to go into what kind of equipment you're going to operate, and that's going to be a moving target for sure. But I see we're a bit over on time here, but before I wrap it up, I'd love to just open it up to both of you to share any parting thoughts you may have with our viewers. Anything we didn't get to that you still like to share?
Seth, I had one last thing. Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, TEL was founded by a trucker, and the mission for our organization is just to support the very entrepreneurial nature of truckers. And you think back the last 25 years in this business, truckers are resilient. We've been through many of these regulatory changes, be it emissions or hours of service or whatever the regulation may be. They always survive. And this is just another chapter in trucking, and where TEL really finds its niche is that carrier that needs the additional support that we can come in behind or with and support with equipment, maintenance support, and kind of help them grow through navigating the changes. But truckers always survive. That's what I've seen the last 25 years.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think Aaron hit the nail on the head. Where TEL thrives at is whether you're an independent contractor looking to get in your first truck, or grow your fleet from 1 to 2 trucks to 5, or 5 to 50, or 50 to 100, or take that step from 100 to 200. TEL's there to everyday partner with you and make better financial decisions on how you handle equipment acquisitions and disposals. I mean, that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. We do thousands and thousands of transactions each year around that. And we want to give you the information so you can really make the best decision. So I do want to mention here at the very end too, we have a white paper that's out. It's at our website, tel360.com. It's going to be basically around these emission changes that we talked about in pre-buy strategies, and you can come check that out at our website. You can also come visit us. We have a location in Chattanooga. We got a location in Greenfield, right outside Indianapolis, Indiana. Or you can call us at 423-214-3910. We'd love to talk shop and chat about what kind of equipment decisions you need to make over the next 24 months, and give you the information that you need to make the right decision. So, Seth, it was awesome talking to you today. It was fun.
Yeah, great conversation. I feel like we could keep going, but I know we all have busy lives and shorter and shorter attention spans these days. So I'll wrap it up at this point. I do like the comment though about the industry over the years always adapting to whatever emission changes we've seen in the past, and that will continue, of course, in the future. And because it's not an option, right? Trucking's not optional. We all depend on it.
Yep.
It's the whole economy relies on freight transportation, and the biggest piece of that pie is trucking. So thank you guys again. Very insightful conversation here about a very important topic for the industry, and really appreciate you both joining the program and sharing your knowledge and expertise. Thanks again, Jacob and Aaron. Really enjoyed the conversation.